Hello and welcome to the B&B Show. My name is Brandon Kane of Little Voice, an ever-losing voice, and my partner here to the left is going to be Seahawks, Brendan Nelson, and we have got a first round to discuss. We're going to be doing all 3 of the days of the draft here. This is our first night of the draft. The first round has fully commenced and finished up. I think we're going to have a little bit of a fun show tonight, Brendan, because we might be sitting on a couple of different ends of the spectrum, but how are you doing, my man?
I'm doing pretty good, man. I'm doing pretty good. It's always fun to cover the draft, even when you only have the one pick. Last year we got spoiled. Last year we had a little too much fun, so we had to pull it back a little bit.
Yeah, you don't get to always have 19 picks in the first 2 rounds. That's just not reality. So you gotta come crashing back down to earth eventually, I suppose. It was a fun draft, though, was it not? Unpredictable, wild to watch with the run of the first with the offensive players and those first 14 picks going straight through. What were you kind of thinking of as you went through this draft, seeing this kind of breakdown?
Well, that's what happens when you make tackling illegal, right? Everybody wants to take offensive players, so there you go. Let's start there.
Yeah, it's definitely a bit of a driver of that, at least.
But for the most part, I thought it made a lot of sense, and I thought it broke pretty well for the Seahawks. We had 6 quarterbacks go in the top 12, which was exactly what I was hoping for. Once the Giants decided to stick with Daniel Jones for a little bit longer, I thought maybe it wasn't going to happen. And Atlanta decided to, I have a little bit of a theory with Atlanta. I kind of feel like they, the tampering stuff. I think the NFL came in and were like, okay, you can keep your pick, but you have to take a quarterback. I know you just gave $180 million to Kirk Cousins, but this is your punishment. You have to take a quarterback. So that was great. That was one of the strangest, most unexpected first round happenings of my life. That to me is the last time I had a reaction like that was the Jordan Love pick with Green Bay, I think, because that blew me away. But I think this was even more shocking than that. So that was fun. And by the time our pick came up at 16, there was still a lot on the board that I really liked. And I think we've clearly seen over the years, trading back in the draft has just kind of become a lost art. Teams are not willing to give up enough to trade up unless they're getting a super duper blue chipper like a quarterback or last year, Will Anderson. So when our pick came up and we took like 7 minutes off the clock before we punched our pick in, I do suspect we were trying to shop around and there was nothing good. So we ended up picking, and I was like, okay, that's there's definitely a ton here I would be pretty happy coming away with. So leading up to the Seahawks pick, I thought the day was going really well. It's too bad Bowers couldn't slip a little bit further, but that was always a pipe dream anyway. It's amazing to me he got as far as he did.
Yeah. I think it's back to that money thing with him where you just didn't want to pay him the money you'd have to pay him at 9 versus 13, which is a couple million different that made it a little bit able to make happen.
Right. To me, he's still a top 3 player in this draft, so I was very surprised he fell as far as he did.
Yeah. He definitely, it speaks to the tight end position because he is that talented, Brendan. I think it does just speak to the fact that these guys don't want to pay that kind of money at the tight end position. And I think that more than the evaluation of him ended up riding stronger and harder than just who he is as a player and what he's going to bring to the table.
Yeah, absolutely. But and then we got to the pick, and at that point, the guy that I was really I'll say this. I don't know who you had at the top of your big board at that point, but my favorite player available at 16 when our pick came up was Dallas Turner. He was the number 1 player on my board at that point. Do you know who yours was?
Yeah, it probably would have been Dallas Turner as well on that side of it, for sure. So, and he went the very next pick after this one. So definitely that's where the NFL kind of saw it as well. I had him as the best edge in this draft, and definitely that would have been that point if they'd taken him. I would have thought it that way.
Right. So I was feeling really good going into our pick personally. I felt like things had broken pretty much perfectly for the Seahawks. Like, again, Bowers was a pipe dream. I wasn't actually sitting here pissed off that Bowers didn't fall to us. That was unrealistic.
Yeah, no, nor I. I didn't think it was ever really going to be I'm not even sure if he fell to us, they would have made him the pick, to be honest with you. As hard as that would have been, I think that's really a chance you would have moved back, I think, at that point.
Maybe. So you want to go ahead and just talk about the pick now?
Yeah, no, let's let's dive into it. I think when it comes to Dallas Turner, I did have a higher grade on him. The thing that I come to from my standpoint on this, Brendan, is that while I had the high grade on him, he's not a finished product. And right now you have a developmental edge on this roster in Derek Hall. That is your hyper talented developmental edge. You have Boye Mafe rounding into shape. You have Uchenna Nwosu on this roster. I'm not going to bring up Daryl Taylor, but it wasn't as necessarily much to me as the pressing need of what you look at in the interior of the defensive line. I think that Draymond Jones's days here are going to be numbered on the back of this deal. If not a trade, let's say tomorrow, that we're going to see some kind of deal within the next year of him off and that money out and them saving that money. So this is a little bit of a move for that. And that's what smart organizations do. They don't react in the moment when, oh, we need the defensive tackle right now. You look at it a year ahead of an advance so that you can be on the forward thinking approach on the moves you kind of make instead of reacting to everything, instead of being kind of in that back foot in the way you look at it. So I think that they were looking at that situation long term. You don't want Leonard Williams eating up the kind of snaps that he was eating up this past year. I don't know if Draymond's on the roster or not. And I think they really like this upside, Brendan. I mean, I come down on this pick. Really, my bottom line is is my evaluation where the Seahawks evaluation is on Byron Murphy on this player? Not necessarily. Is it as far a difference for me as other picks that I've seen them make in recent years, Brendan, like LJ Collier, who I had a late third, fourth round grade on, or Jordan Brooks that I had a fourth round grade on, or Eskridge that I had a fourth round grade on? It's much different territory for me because it's not that wide of a difference in my evaluation point to where the Seahawks were at. And one thing you can say about this pick, whether you like it or not, is you can't deny that the Seattle Seahawks actually love this player. They weren't painted in a corner to take him. They weren't forced to go take him. There were 6 minutes left on that clock when they announced that the pick was in, meaning that John wasn't even really going to entertain taking ideas to move back, meaning they were that much in on this particular player. So while my personal evaluation isn't one that says this would have been my guy there, or I would have gone maybe for Dallas Turner, it's one I can understand their thinking and going to, and I don't consider it a major reach. And I think by the Seattle Seahawks stance on this, Brendan, I think that they're sitting in that building tonight believing that they got the best defensive player in this draft. And if that is the case, it's hard for me to poo-poo the pick very much.
Yeah, and that's kind of where I land on it. Like if you want your team to take a BPA approach, which I think most people do. Yes. Most people want their team to do BPA as often as possible. Then you have to be willing to live with the results. And sometimes the results are they're going to have a different BPA than you personally do. And you have to live with that. And you have to just hope that their judgment ends up being correct more often than not. And I think that's probably what happened here. I said it a few times during the pre-draft process. Murphy was just one of those players that I didn't get the way a lot of people did, but a lot of people did get him. I had a lot of people in my Discord, a lot of people in my comments, a lot of people in my chat today that loved Byron Murphy, that thought he was a top 10 player in this draft, that thought he was the best defensive player in this draft. They thought all these things about him. And I found myself on a little bit of an island when they made the pick because I thought it was okay. A lot of people said it's way better than okay. This is the best pick we've made in a long time. This is incredible. And I can definitely see a situation where maybe I'm just going to be a little bit off here. Maybe he's better than I thought. Now, there are some people out there who are calling him he's the next Aaron Donald. I don't believe that. I don't know where that comes from. Could he be the next Grady Jarrett? Maybe. That seems reasonable to me. He could be the next Geno Atkins. He could be somebody like that, and that would be all right. That would be totally workable.
Let me ask you a question. If you have the options of the two final out players that you would get between Dallas Turner and Byron Murphy here, and when you say, okay, Dallas Turner's upside is he's going to be Hassan Reddick, and Byron Murphy's upside is he's going to be Grady Jarrett, which of those do you take?
You're telling me that's what they're going to be?
Yes.
Well, if you're telling me that's where they're going to be, then yeah, I would probably take Murphy because interior pass rush is more important than edge pass rush. I think in that case, you would probably say yes. Now, I have a little bit of a different perception of Dallas Turner's potential. I think he could be better than that. But if that's where he lands, then sure. So I ended up being okay with the pick overall. I think I think I need to, and I was going to do this no matter what. I need to really throw myself into studying this player a little bit more and see if I can find the thing that everyone else seemed to get that I didn't quite get about him.
Yeah. Yeah, I to me is again, and I still stand by my grade of where I had him at, Brendan, and I don't think that it's fair to go to the Aaron Donald comparison. I'm with you on that, and that I think that that's just overstating it. That's a generational player, and trying to make that comp is just, it's like trying to make the comp to Patrick Mahomes. It's not a smart one to do. Let's go to more of a realistic one. Ed Oliver, Grady Jarrett, Geno Atkins. There is a baseline of players at this size who can come in and be impactful at the position. And so at his size alone, I think that's where those comps to me fit, where you have you have a background on this and a couple of guys that have done it recently and done it at a very high level to give you some confidence that it can be successful. And he is a guy with movement skills from a lateral standpoint that is different from other people in this draft, and his ability to do that and his pass rush moves he brings to play. I mean, you bring up Dallas Turner and he might become to go get to be that player, but no matter how high you might think Dallas Turner is or how you've been on him, he is not a finished product right now. This is not Will Anderson coming out from last year with that productivity that Will Anderson had for a couple of years. He's got a long way to go, I think, to get to that spot of things. And this guy's ready to go right now. So I do think that his bounce inside, his athletic bounce, that running back background that he brings with that footwork, you know, when you and I talked about it, that stutter step that he sets up with off the snap is unique unto himself. There is no other defensive tackle in this draft that does that. There isn't any defensive tackle in recent drafts that I've seen done it. Even a Kalijah Cansey guy was first step quickness to get up into the single gap, right? He's just trying to explode through the gap. With this guy, he's going to set you up. He's going to feel you in the moment. I think it's that unique skill set that really drew Seattle to them in that way, is that he just looks different than other defensive tackles that you see come out in recent years in that way. Doesn't mean he's better or he's some elite talent, but it does mean he's got something that is just kind of wholly unique to him.
Yeah, I can agree with that. There's some very special stuff here. I think he led the entire country in pass rush win rate for an interior defensive lineman.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there is some stuff that stands out with him. And he's doing this playing a decent chunk of his snaps in A gap. It's not all B gap stuff. I think it was like 150 A gap, 400 B gap, I want to say. Something like that. So there is something unique and interesting there. I'm not convinced that he's a finished product yet either. He is only 21 years old, and I do think he needs to improve a little bit against the run, like Turner does, honestly. But I asked myself the question after the pick was made, and I want to ask you this as well. Do you think that Byron Murphy II is better at what he does than Quinyon Mitchell is at what he does?
No.
Yeah.
No, Byron, I had higher grade on Quinyon Mitchell.
Right. So the question is, and this is where it's getting really tough, how much of an additional value do you place on a guy like a Byron Murphy because he plays that ever important interior pass rusher role versus Quinyon Mitchell playing outside cornerback?
Well, I think that also comes down to where I get settled up on this is that I feel like Seattle's over the moon in this pick, and that's drawing me as much as anything. It doesn't draw me away from my evaluations, be it of Dallas Turner or of Quinyon Mitchell, who had a blue chip grade on in this draft. I still trust in those assessments there, but this is a little bit of that different hat of, you know, what I look at in my outlook of these players versus what I know about from this front office and how they look at him. And we're hearing all of this heat from this front office coming into this day. Brendan, you had Byron Murphy told coming into this day that if you get to 16, you're not getting past 16. He was told that yesterday. That we're getting reports of that. You know, it's been very rare that I've seen Seattle as hot to trot on a particular prospect as this, to the point that they showed their hand in that way 24 hours out, to the point that they're turning in a card with 6 minutes left. I mean, Brendan, you've watched these drafts a lot. How often do you remember John Schneider turning in a card early?
I mean, that is good. That is true. We did turn in the card a little bit earlier. I am led to believe that they did field some trade offers, but didn't feel any of them. So I'm sure there was at least a conversation there, but it was quicker than usual. You're right.
Yeah. And it's not that it's just that they will usually wait till that last minute to make sure there's not something there they can come and get. And they were excited enough by him to go, okay, we've heard a couple of initial offers. We're not going to wait this down the last minute. Let's just go do it. And that's what's really emboldening me back to the pick, is that they don't show this on every prospect in that way. And the fact that they're showing so much kind of love for this guy means to me that scouting department General Manager John Schneider, Mike McDonald. There's a lot of unison of opinion in that building about their outlook of him. And you talked about league opinion. This is a guy like Witherspoon last year in certain decrees, where when it came to the draft, you and I had Christian Gonzalez higher than Witherspoon. And we thought, well, he's a man guy and we liked him a lot, but should he be the 5th overall pick? Well, but you were hearing from not just within the Seahawks building, but NFL circles, when you paid attention and listened to certain people talk, former NFL pros, Rondé Barber, former cornerback, talking about him, guys that had played the position and done it at a high level, talk about this player. And they talked about him so emphatically as being that guy. You're hearing some of the similar stuff with Byron Murphy in the way that these other outlying areas talk about him and their view of him. That's outside of our scouting and Seattle scouting, but just that he's definitely been a favorite in certain parts. Not everybody, not uniformly, not unanimously, but that there's definitely some people out there giving you those same kind of vibes, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I definitely think that this team loves Byron Murphy. I think a lot of teams loved Byron Murphy. I think that if we didn't take him, there was another team right behind us that would have taken him. I think there are teams that wanted to trade up with us to take him. So I'm not doubting that. There are a ton of fans out there, a ton of pundits who love Byron Murphy. If you look around the internet right now, you'll see a lot of the draft experts giving us A+ grades for this pick. So there was a lot of excitement here, and I can totally see the appeal in that as a Seahawks fan of this pick. And I like the approach, the general approach of drafting an interior pass rusher. I like the approach of getting somebody like, you may have not seen, I don't know who Pete Carroll would have picked if he was in charge of this draft, but I have a feeling he wouldn't have taken Byron Murphy because Murphy's a pass rusher and unfinished product is a run stuffer. But I like that we went that way. The only thing is, and this is just the thing that I kept coming back to on the stream today, I just wasn't blown away with the tape the way that a lot of people were. And I need to go watch more of it. I need to maybe my second look will be better. But to me, he was a first-round player, but not much more than that. So hard for me to get past that.
Yeah, and I mean, this is the difference in evaluation. Where I again didn't see necessarily the star power there worth the grade that I put him in. But I mean, again, if he's bad against the run, why he got an 80.5 run grade by PFF? Why he's the second highest rated defensive tackle in college football last year? To me, if you're struggling in one part of your game, in a particular part of your game, be it the run or the pass, and you're from your standpoint, then you're not going to post those kind of grades. You're not going to show out that kind of way. And I where you can find some moments here and there where he gets attacked on the tape and he's barrel rolled over in the run game. He still posted an 80.5 grade, which would probably be about top 30 in college football as just a run defense grade, period. I'm not trying to lean on that grade wholly, but I'm going to say that it matched to what I saw, that I didn't see a guy that's got a complete liability against the run, who's only this pass rush kind of specialist, or that he got that grade on the back of merely his pass rush acumen. There's about a 10-point difference between the two. So to me, because I've had people try to tell me that, well, he takes plays off. It's like, well, hold on. The guy's not going to be the second highest rated defensive tackle in the sport taking plays off. It doesn't work that way. You're going to get negatively graded and dinged. At the very least, he'd be a 30, 35, 40 guy at that point, right? And the way he's rated. So yeah, I get not being totally sold on this. I'm a little bit in the same boat with you to a degree, and that, hey, I didn't have the high grade on him necessarily, but I have been a little bit overwhelmed, I think, by the general way that I'm getting the sense from not just the people that you kind of hear on the outside talking about this guy, but also by what you're hearing from the front office and what just the steps they've taken and how much they've been hot to trot on this guy. That's unusual for them. They usually there's not this much on like that, I feel like, at times.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that, and there is something to be said for that. And after this draft is over, like I said, over the next week or so, I'm gonna go into the lab a little bit. I'm gonna look at him again, see if maybe I feel a little bit differently. But like, I don't know. I spend all this time talking about taking BPA. So I can only get so excited when they take a guy who was not even in my top 30 at 16. So yeah. I have to temper it a little bit.
It's a fair enough criticism. It really is. I get where you're coming from on it. So it's, the higher, there were higher grade guys, and value is the driver of the day for sure. I do think, Brendan, and you would agree with this, even though maybe our evaluations weren't there, that we can trust in the fact that they didn't have Dallas Turner ahead of Byron Murphy on their board. That This was not a pick for need. That this was the pick for, you can see all the hallmarks of being a pick for value. And then even though we disagree with that being that, I totally have trust and faith that John had Byron Murphy as his highest rated player up on his board when their pick came up. And that's what I want them to pick from as value from that. I'd love for them to agree with me, but I really just want to make sure that my front office is picking for value first and foremost at all times. And that's why I think I love this pick, to kind of break it all down to bottom line, why I love it as much as anything, because I think they did that. Do you think that's fair?
Oh, I'm sure he was the number one defensive player on their board. He had to have been. There's no way Latu was higher.
No, I absolutely don't think Latu. Yeah, exactly. So, it's at least there's that. They're staying true to their process, and that's what I want to see them doing throughout this whole draft, not just today.
So, that's what I can say about the pick. I think it's all right. It's going to be one of those things where I have to see it to fully believe it. But that doesn't mean I won't believe it. I mean, with Witherspoon, I kind of took that approach as well. I was like, okay, you're taking a man corner and you're going to put him in your zone heavy scheme. How's this going to work? I'm going to have to see this. And it worked really well. Yeah. So me not being so sure about this one doesn't preclude him being awesome.
Totally. No, it's still it happens with all of us on this too. And I was in the same place you were with Witherspoon last year. I like the pick, but how does this work? You go run zone. He needs to be running man. I mean, now you're going to go more man now. But he still turned out to be a great player. And I think that as long as you're picking on that value-based standpoint, you're going to walk away with a great player one way or the other. And I think he's going to be helpful to us. Billy Henningsen, thank you for the $15 donation. Says, anyone who watched us get gutter stomped in the run game for the last 3 years should be juiced for Big Cat and Murphy the second. Najee Harris couldn't break out a wet paper bag until playing us last year. It's true. Run defense has been a problem the past couple of years, is it not, Brendan?
Yes, it has. But one of the things that I really try to espouse on my YouTube channel is don't overreact. You have to react properly. So I like addressing it. Of course, you have to address the problem. But I also look at it and I go, okay, I want to address the problem in the proper way. I want to make sure that I'm not going over the top. Like, and a great example, last year, we had a problem at right guard, right? We had Phil Haynes at right guard. And a lot of people were saying we should take Osiris Torrance with our 37th overall pick for a right guard. And I was like, that's overreacting. It's a right guard, and it's not even a scheme fit. I don't want to overreact. If I think Murphy's the 30th or the approximate 30th best player in this draft, and we take him at 16, if I'm right about that assessment, that's overreacting. Now, I might be wrong about that assessment. Time will tell. But I that's one thing that I always hit on. Don't overreact to fix the problem. React to the proper amount.
Agreed. I'd be fully for that, but it also takes the investment in it to fix it, right? You also have to make the tangible investment into the front four. And when you look at that run defense a couple years ago, especially when they tried to run with those 4 low-end defensive tackles of Al Harris and Quinn Jefferson and Poona Ford, and it didn't work because you didn't go hard enough. And you needed to bring in better talent. You need to bring in better high-end talent. And I think that they've started to take those steps the last couple of years after they moved off all those guys. I think we dumped all 4 of our defensive linemen 2 years ago, Brennan, and it was a rebuild process at that point. But I don't think you can come into another year here and allow for this run defense. You're in a rebuild year, so there's not as much at stake, but you'd ideally not to come back for another year again, having the run defense issues not solved. And especially on the back of you not going hard enough with the personnel talent there to make it work, which looking back the last couple of years here, last year especially, Jaron Reed was good against the run early on, and some of those guys were decent, but you had to run them too many snaps. You didn't have the depth. You had the frontline guys, but you couldn't trust anybody behind them. And so it's not just then about getting those starters. You got to get that depth in there as well on top of it. And for all we know, they're going to have to kick Draymond Jones, if they keep him on the roster, back out to edge again this year. So you need maybe potentially this guy to be your number 2 right off the bench behind Williams. It's past also the NASCAR packages you can run with those 2 guys on passing downs.
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking about the defensive line. You get rid of Draymond Jones, you've got Williams, you've got Murphy,
Morris.
And then Morris, and then what? Miles Adams. Like, then it's still really thin.
Well, I mean, you're only going to get a position group so thick as far as 3 tech goes. I mean, who's after Justin Matabuke? Who do the Ravens have? It's not realistic to sit there and say you're going to have 5-3 techs that you're going to be able to rock through. If you get to the point of having 2 or 3 guys that you're able to trust in, I think that's good enough, especially when it's Williams and Murphy as your 1-2 punch. The thing you're trying to prevent is what happened last year, Brendan, is that you had to roll with your frontline guys too much. They're playing way too many snaps over the course of the game, and they're getting wore down because of it, so they're less effective because of it. That happened to Jaron. That happened to Williams as the year went along. Williams had to play 18 games last year, and you couldn't give him any breather in there because of the fact you needed him so badly, because you couldn't trust you couldn't trust Cam Young. You couldn't really trust Miles Adams when he went out there. None of the other defensive tackles were making it happen. And you've got to, if we're looking at, I agree, not being reactive, but there's a difference between not reactive and ignoring a problem. And I think that if you went through into this draft and went like, it's going to self-correct itself with a new scheme change, I think that that's a little bit of a leap of logic. This was going to require more investment, especially understanding it was on the back of you flipping out all those defensive tackles not 2 years ago. You turning the whole group around 2 years ago. You drafting a young Cam Young who needed time to develop, a Mike Morrison needed time to develop. It's not a certain group there and how you set the stage for it. So all the more reason to me that if that guy's the top guy on your board, that fits to a little bit of you also strengthening up what's also a weakness on top of being the top guy on their board.
Yeah. And again, if he was the top guy on their board, I can't say too much bad about it, right? Because again, everybody's board is going to be a little bit different, and you just have to live with the results as a fan.
Yeah. No, I totally get that, but I can also understand your criticism of it, and I think it's still well warranted on having some of the trepidations you do. We've hammered wanting to operate from value-based model, and if there is this other guy that's a bit higher that you have on the board, it's understandable to say, well, maybe the drift should have been more to that. Though you do know if they would have gone Quinn and Mitchell, that we would have had half the Hawk fans jumping off buildings at that point.
I know, but I have to go with my evaluation when I do this stuff, or else what's the point? 100%. And I loved Quinyon Mitchell. I thought he was corner to rival Witherspoon last year.
Mm-hmm. I did too, man. He's one of my blue chip guys I had my only blue chip defensive guy. So I was right there with you on it. But I get this. I do get this, and I know you'll come around on it too. And you're not that far out on it, really. You're just It's not LJ Collier, it's not Brooks. That's my thing. They had that Eskridge plays where it's like those were just, oh my God, Brendan, like what reaches those were at the time.
Yeah. I see some people. I saw some people, and because there were people who hated this pick, trying to draw an equivalency with those picks, and there's no equivalency there at all. Not even close. Even something like Penny, which I don't think was that bad of a pick at the time, although it was a reach. Like there's no equivalency.
No, I can't get there on that. Those were just felt way worse in this one. This is just a little bit more of a minor standpoint on that. But Billy, thank you for the $15 donation. And let's see if we can get this run defense battened down a little bit better this upcoming season. Appreciate you. David Pugh, thank you for the $10 donation. Says Byron Murphy had the number 1 pass rush win rate against all interior defensive linemen and number 3 in all qualifying interior defensive linemen since 2014. And he's 21. I understand not being over the moon about the pick, B, but a little faith, my brother, laughing out loud.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I saw the pass rush win rate thing. That was one of the big positives about him, of course. I think I'm pretty sure he's not a very good tackler. That was one of the things that stood out to me when I watched him. He had a really high missed tackle rate. That kind of put me off of him a little bit, I think. But when you're playing on the defensive line, I guess that's not as important as it is that you're actually disruptive. So.
Well, it's like coaches will sometimes say, pressures and quarterback hits can be sometimes just as important to them as actual sacks go. But I think that there is a little bit of that. You see a bit on his tape where the sealing the deal, go through, get the whole move done, get past the lineman, bend the corner, get right there to the quarterback, and you can't quite bring him down. You saw a little bit of this with the Michael Penix Husky game with Byron Murphy, where he was really wrecking shop through a lot of that game. But Michael Penix, with some of that subtle pocket movement, was able to step around him and kind of avoid him at times, with just that kind of nice little movement ability he could show. And Byron wasn't able to be as impactful, but he was still very disruptive in that game. And I agree. I think that's what you're really going to be looking to get with him, is that disruption, that ability to just kind of muck plays up, redirect them early on, get you quick wins, fast wins with that pass rush. Not the kind of the try hard, high motor guy, Brendan, that wears you down. He'll give you quick wins as well, where you don't always have to wait for it.
Mm-hmm. Right.
That's a wonderful stat, David. I wasn't aware of that one myself. So number 3 in qualifying interior defensive linemen since 2024 in his pass rush win rate. That's very impressive. There have been some good ones that have come down the line since that. We're talking a 10-year period here, Brendan. So no small stat there.
Yeah, it's significant.
Thank you, David, for the $10 donation and also the great stat there. Nolan, concierge with Nolan coming in with a $50 donation. Man, thank you guys so very much. Very kind of you. I really do appreciate that, Nolan. I know you're a big donor in both of our channels, a big support in both our channels, so very much appreciated. When teams can just hand the ball off for 4+ yards every play, it doesn't matter how good your corners are. If we can't stop the run, I think we have the corners to if we can stop the run, I think we have the corners to hold up and not get thrown on like 3 to 5 years ago when we couldn't stop the pass.
Yeah, there is definitely something there. It's just one of the thing that I would come back to with something like this is, where is the strength of the draft this particular year? It was with the cornerbacks. There were some phenomenal cornerback prospects in this class, and you had the opportunity to draft, I think, all of them. I think all of them were available when you picked. Mm-hmm. And if sometimes you just have to kind of go with the flow a little bit. Now, again, I don't think that's what happened. I think that they did take their best player available, and I can't say anything bad about that. I think they had the right approach. I think they had the right idea. I think they approached this draft with the right mindset. I do. Mm-hmm. The thing that keeps me from loving this pick is I personally just didn't love what I saw on the field.
Yeah, I understand. No, I get where you're coming from with it. And, but, you know, the stopping the run's been the issue the last 2 years, Nolan. There's no doubt about it. And we've had whole games where, to your point, and we've suffered through these. It's be the Raiders game from 2 years ago, the Panthers game from 2 years ago, the Falcons game from 2 years ago. We can go through the list of the games this year, including the Najee Harris Steeler game, where those offenses weren't doing anything complicated. You know, they were just lining up and handing the ball off over and over and saying, you can't stop it. You don't have the bodies to get it done. And some of that was probably a bit of the scheme holding it back, but I do think some of that was also the talent, and they're also keeping it held back. And the team is going to fix this, Brendan. I think, as we saw with Williams' presence in last year, and the run defense actually kind of still was not able to take another step forward, is that it took a lot of reinforcing here. You know, you had to get the walls heavily reinforced to hope to get this turned around for as bad a state as it was in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can definitely get behind it. I think he will be good. I'll say that. I can't imagine him like busting. I can imagine him not being a stud, but hard for me to imagine that he's going to bust. I'll say it like, I'll put it that way.
At the very least, a productive member in the rotational set there. I agree with you there. I don't think that there's a big bust rate on this player. We'll see where the ceiling lands, Brendan. We'll see where that kind of finishes up at, but I do not see a guy that you're looking at as going to be a bust kind of player. In regards to the corners to concierge, Nolan, and your point on this, I think there's something to this. Being that I've always kind of thought this a little bit with the pass rush, is that you go and you get your great corners on the outside, you build outside in. It doesn't work as well as building inside out. If I have a corner that's out there that can hold on in coverage for 5 seconds, which is great for a corner, but I have a defensive line that's not going to get there but for 7 seconds, it doesn't matter how good that corner is, he's still going to get exposed at that point. Whereas if I have a defensive line that can get to the cornerback in under 3.5 seconds, and I have a corner that can hold on for 4 seconds on the outside, he gets helped by the defensive line. The inverse doesn't necessarily work back the other way all the time. It can help for those coverage sacks and those high motor plays that those guys can get to, but it doesn't really help as well as it's interlinked the other way, in my opinion. Do you buy into that, Brendan?
Yeah, I do agree with that. Like, there was a little bit of a movement a few years ago towards believing that corners and defensive backs were more important than guys on the front. It seems like that's fizzled out a little bit. It does.
It does to me too. And you're right. It was being presented out there a little bit more often. I didn't buy into it at the time, really. And I thought, okay, this is where analytics is telling us it's going. They're saying this is what is more important. I still just come back to no, it's build from the front to the back. And it works really to me on both sides of the ball at the end of the day. It's an old cliche, Brendan. It's old as time, but it is true. It's valid and it still holds up. And, it's good. That's one reason I do like this move, but I do keep coming back to that. The D line can help at the corner. The corner can't always necessarily help out the D lineman. They can help out a little bit. It's not that there's not some kind of help they're providing on that back end, but their help can be neutralized if you just you suck that much up front defensive line wise to allow those quarterbacks that amount of time. And especially with our reticence, Brendan, to blitz over the last couple of years, we've seen those plays where those quarterbacks drop back and they're padding the ball and they've got 5, 6, 7 seconds and we're not getting any pressure. So we've seen it play out like that in games too, on top of it.
Absolutely. I can, I just hope he ends up being as good as some people seem to think he is. Like I said, there are people in my Discord who call him the next Aaron Donald. I hope he's that good.
If we got the next Aaron Donald, what would that mean? If he's Aaron Donald, what does that mean for this team next year, you think? I mean,
well, Aaron Donald, he won Rookie of the Year, right?
Yeah, he was sensational from day one. Yeah. He was Donald from day one, pretty much.
Yeah. I mean, that does change things pretty significantly.
Is that it? If you get that kind of player, Brendan, does that turn this team into a playoff team almost in itself if he can be that kind of player?
We missed the playoffs by 1 game last year and we didn't do that much turnover. So yeah, I would certainly think so. Honestly, you could argue on some level we were unlucky that we didn't make the playoffs last year with 9 wins. Most years with the 7th seed being added, 9 wins get you in. And we had a tougher than average schedule. So yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I do as well. And certainly takes the top off of the potential of that team next year on top of, I think, putting you in the playoffs of what you might be able to accomplish. So hopefully the fans are right on that one, Brendan. I'd love for that to be the case on it. And like you, I'm not there. I'm not trying to overstate it. I want to stay in that Ed Oliver, Grady Jarrett, Geno Atkins. Let's stay in that kind of mode of player. And I think that's who you're looking at being able to bring aboard here above all else. Well said, though, Mr. Nolan. And man, thank you so very much for all of your donations and support. $50. That's a tremendous dono drop here on the stream. So thank you so much, man. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you, Nolan.
You're awesome, brother, but you're always awesome. Another guy that's always awesome is Garth Knight, dropping in a $5 donation. Thank you for that, Garth. He says, by the way, I'm happy as hell for Michael Penix with the Falcons. Falcons are going to do it right. So let me sell a little bit to you on this, Brendan. Okay. I know you're not hard on the Michael Penix thing, but from the Falcons perspective on this, could have gotten Dallas Turner. Dallas Turner seems like the straightforward one to pair with Arnold Ebiketie. Whether we believe this or not, this team seems to think that they've got at the very least a divisional aspirations. And then they also believe that they can be a Super Bowl contending team. I don't think you make the Kirk Cousins move unless you really think otherwise, what's the point? But if you're in that mode, Brendan, and you're really going for it and you believe in that way with Cousins at the helm, do you want to look at what happened with the Jets? Don't you want to look at what happened with the Jets situation and have that inform you a little bit on this to be, okay, we're going to risk it on this quarterback, but does that risk mean that it's ride or die all the way with just Kirk Cousins? And then if he snaps his other Achilles bone 2 games of the season, our year's just toast, investments sunk, and we're done? Or is it smarter to find a true blue, real insurance policy there if that does occur?
Insurance policy is great, but I'm not spending a top 10 pick on it. You're not, especially a guy who I know some people love him. I don't consider him to be a blue chipper. He's good. I like him, but there are some real barriers between him and NFL level success. So I can't get behind that one. To me, that was one of the strangest draft day decisions I've ever seen. If you want to get insurance for Cousins, go get a decent veteran. Go get somebody. Well, you should participate in the process much earlier in the offseason than you did. You should have done it before all the quarterbacks got signed. Even go get somebody like what's his name? Even go get somebody like a Ryan Tannehill. Go get somebody like Marcus Mariota. Penix, I don't think Penix is going to be better as a rookie than those guys. He's going to be a rookie.
I'm not so sure on it with that. He's an older rookie. He's played 2 straight years of college football, and I know I might be a little bit more in on him than they. It is an insurance policy on the surface of this, Brendan, but it's also a 2-shot. So it's an insurance policy, and it's your quarterback of the future. Kirk Cousins is probably not likely to be there past 2 years. And so it is also about you having a quarterback with 5 years of club control, 3 years after essentially at that point Cousins potentially moves on. This is the reason why Cousins people are so mad about this, is that this gives them the out in that deal when they want it to come up. So it's also those 2 things. And the thing I've said about Penix from day one is I think he can have, I know you don't necessarily feel this way. I do think he can find success, but I've said he's got to have certain things set up for him to have that success. What does Atlanta have? A great offensive line, Yeah, everybody goes, well, he can't be throwing those deep shot balls just to any receiver at the next level and hope they're going to win those contested catch situations. And guess what? You got Drake London, who was one of the best contested catchers in college football and a great contested catcher in the NFL on the outside. And then he's got Kyle Pitts on the other side, another very good contested catcher. He's got Bijan Robinson in his backfield with a really solid backup on top of it. He's going to be put up into a position to have those parameters right for him, Brendan, to find success, in my opinion. And we may be differing on this one, but I do think this is actually a move that's not super crazy by the Falcons and makes a lot of sense. Why get yourself into that pickle that the Jets did last year? Their season was over when Rodgers went down. Why put yourself into that predicament if you think you're a Super Bowl winning team? If you have the opportunity to find a guy that can give you some built into insurance, I wouldn't have made the Cousins deal in the first place. That's where I think they really went wrong. I don't think it's the Michael Penix thing. I think it's the getting the Cousins thing where they went wrong. But Marcus Mariota is not going to get anything done for you on a football field. This is what he's going to get done for you. This is what Ryan Tannehill is going to get done for you on a football field at this point in time in his career. Are they backups in names? Yeah, but they don't give you any upside. They're on the downward spiral of their career at this point. So I think it's a big difference between a Penix than what you would have had on the open market if your Falcons looking for other options. There wasn't a lot of great options on the quarterback market this offseason. That stood out. I think it's a good move for them, man. I do. And I think if he goes in there, he's going to be set up for success.
I think it's the worst draft pick I've ever seen in my life. I give it an F-. I think every single Falcons fan needs to be given the option at this point to just go root for another team. I think we as fans need to just be like, hey, if you want to go root for the Chiefs or something, we're just going to look the other way. We're going to pretend we didn't see. You can burn all your Falcon stuff. We'll pretend you never had it. Like, I feel so bad for them.
Because you don't trust that Michael Penix can get to that potential?
That's part of it. That's part of it. They took a guy who I think was maybe a late first round pick in the top 10. And by the way, there's a report now that they had some very appealing trade offers from teams that wanted to trade up to get Penix, including one from the Seahawks that included DK Metcalf. I don't know if you've heard this or not.
I didn't hear that. No, I didn't hear the DK Metcalf side. Oof.
Yeah. I don't know if it's real or not. I don't. But there was a rumor that the Seahawks were trying to trade up to the top 10 to get Penix, and that DK would have been part of the trade.
I would not have been happy with that. And I would not have wanted to see that.
I think the obstacles with Penix are part of it. I think the fact that they've already made this big commitment to their quarterback to try to go all in to win a Super Bowl now is part of it. I think the fact that, what you could have done, just take Rattler in the second round or third round. You could have just anything but use a top 10 pick on this flawed quarterback prospect, just anything else.
See, I don't know about the flawed thing again. Like it is where we get back to our personal evaluations versus where the NFL is. If there's multiple teams willing to trade up with the Falcons to take Penix there, then he's not going back to the first round by the NFL's evaluation of things. Their evaluation of him is that he's a top 15 quarterback in this draft. And quite honestly, that was my evaluation of him. I kind of think you're being a tiny bit hard on Penix with what he produced and what he did at the college level here. He wasn't walking into a program where everything was running downhill and it was all glorious and beautiful. He wasn't running into a situation that was just set up for him to walk in the door and just enjoy success. He's took that Husky program to a place they hadn't been since 92. That's to me worthy of kind of putting a little bit of a higher rank. I understand the stuff you see in his game that will drive you a little bit crazy, but you can't deny the production of what that guy did at the college level. That Texas game, I mean, he goes out there in that Texas game and does an equivalency to what CJ Stroud did the year before in that Georgia game, but he doesn't seem to getting that same credit that Stroud did for his pocket mobility and moving around and avoiding Byron Murphy in the ways that he did. And I feel like he got a little bit slanted away that I don't quite understand. Maybe it's the awkward throwing motion or just whatever, or the injury history with him, which I get with that, but the man put up not just good production, but amazing production 2 straight years. And when you are that way in college as a quarterback, you tend to get picked up in the top 15 if you check off all the boxes as far as mobility, arm strength, leadership stuff, all of that. And with Rattler, to me, there is a huge drop off from Penix to Rattler. We get back to that state of, is this a guy that if Cousins goes down, we're going to be functional? And that's a bit, I get the thing of being bad about Cousins, but once you make the deal for Cousins, this is something that goes secondary of that. It has nothing to do with the Cousins signing. It has to do then with okay, now how do we buttress this signing to make sure that we don't end up in the same situation of a team like the Jets did last year? Now our quarterback goes down and our whole season's out the door when we have a really talented team that's really ready to maybe go compete. And I understand we may not be in that place of that's our evaluation of that team, but that's where they stood with it. And if that's that point, then it makes a lot of sense then to me to go and get that Penix. And I think that I think I have a higher evaluation than you do on him, but
You definitely do. Yeah.
I don't see why. I can't understand where you come from on that side of it. There's certainly some things to pick up.
It's really hard for me to believe that somebody who can't improvise is going to have upper level success in the modern NFL the way it used to be. Like 20, 30 years ago, you had quarterbacks that had absolutely no ability to improvise who were pretty good. But I feel like as time goes by, you need somebody who can go off script more than Penix can. And I just don't see that with him. The numbers all back up that he's completely useless as soon as he gets pressured or has to go off script. I'm just really worried about that part of it. Now, Atlanta is probably his best chance to succeed. I agree with that because they've set things up so well for themselves with that offensive line, with some of the weapons they have, with the running backs they have. I think he's got as good a chance with Atlanta as anybody.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm looking at these other quarterbacks that can go off platform, that can go off script. And I think that's so much more valuable in the modern NFL.
It's a fair point. It's a fair enough point with it. I think that there has been a track record of guys that didn't have to do it. And maybe the game has changed, like you say, with it. But I can go in recent 25-year NFL history and grab plenty of different names of guys that stood in the pocket and were able to make it happen back there, including a guy that's the GOAT all time. It was not an improvisational guy. That's a guy operating on script, on time, all the way. And you ask him to play off script, it's not going to look very pretty, very quick with the Tom Brady type. So I think that there's a mode here of guys. There's a lineage of guys that have still been able to make this work, even in recent NFL history. And he can fit into that spot. The key being for me, Brendan, is that he's got to have the parts in place for him to happen. Just like with Tom, I would say that, right? The whole thing with Tom going to Tampa Bay was he's going to the line that's going to keep him protected. Why? So he doesn't have to play off script. So he doesn't have to scramble around. So he doesn't have to lean into his mobility. So it's really how you set the stage for this kind of quarterback, in my opinion, for them to find that success. But again, I understand there's a little bit of a difference on our opinion on this one, which is cool.
Yeah.
Thank you though, Garth. I appreciate the donation, man. Upo, thank you for the $5 donation. It says cruel irony. If the Giants draft Zerzon Newton with the second round pick, we traded them for Leonard Williams. Go Hawks. Wishing Murphy success.
I think they traded that second round pick to get Brian Burns.
Is that what they did?
I think so. I think they still have their native second rounder, and then they traded the one from the Seahawks.
Yeah.
If I'm recalling correctly. But either way, I see the fundamental discussion here. How do you stand on Newton versus Murphy, by the way?
I went back and forth on this. I think my final board had technically Newton ahead of him, but I just didn't change my big board into my final opinion. I would have still kept him in the round where I kept Byron Murphy. I wouldn't have raised him up in that respect, but I probably would have had him as my best defensive tackle in this draft when it was all said and done. It was neck and neck with him with Newton coming down the line between the two of them. His tape was better this year than Newton's tape was. I'll say that. Mm-hmm. And I will say too that if the Giants take Newton there at the second round with their first pick, even though I know it's not our native pick, I do think that Leonard Williams is a better player than Zerzon Newton, even at his age right now.
I think I agree with that. Yeah, I did like Newton a good amount. I didn't love him the way we were supposed to when the year started, because I remember when the year started, he was so far and away the best defensive lineman, it wasn't even funny. And then Murphy just kind of crept up after him throughout the year.
He did. It wasn't a bad year by Zerzon. It was just kind of it wasn't also that year you look for guys where they take the big step forward and they solidify themselves. So I still think it makes the Leonard Williams pick look fine. If that was going to be the guy you're going to take on the other side of it, kind of like we were saying for a long period of time when the Williams trade happened, Brendan, you weren't going to find as good of a defensive tackle in the second round where the Hawks would have been picking. Certainly, I mean, Newton's going to be off the board by the time where we get to our native pick, right? So if you hadn't taken Byron Murphy, you weren't going to get to a second round pick at that point that was going to be that good into the depth that second round at the line. I mean, you're down to at that point Michael Hall and who else we got, like Tyler Davis, Mekhi Wingo, Braden Fisk.
I like Oro Horo.
He's a good one too, man.
I'm a fan of his. But yeah, these guys are clearly a cut above those, for sure.
They are. Yeah, I would think so there. So it'll be interesting to see what the Giants do here, though. They didn't. I thought they were going to go with McCarthy, man. That was the one that I was getting worried, Brendan. By the way, when McCarthy got past, when he started getting into that area before the Vikings slipped up, I was starting to get a little bit. My collar was getting a little bit tight. I was starting to kind of go.
Yeah.
No,
I mean, I'd say that he's the exact opposite of a JS quarterback, but honestly, I don't feel like Penix is a JS quarterback either. And if we're to believe these rumors, he loved Penix.
that's also could be to the grub factor, right? Though, like if he's got wherever
maybe.
Schneider's, and the thing I'd always been wondering about this when we did the show a couple days ago, talking about this, Brendan, is if you're John Schneider and you're sitting there and maybe you've got an outlook of Penix where you like, I like him, he's good. But then you've got your new offensive coordinator, like, I'll put my job on the line. I'm pounding the table. This is the guy. If you're getting that kind of push from him, it gets hard to kind of deny that, doesn't it? For a guy that's had him 2 years straight and built him up from the ground up in a lot of ways.
I mean, the other side is if I'm JS and I've spent the last 13 years under the thumb of Pete Carroll, and I finally have my freedom to run my team and how I see fit, I'm not going to let my OC tell me what to do. I'm running my own show for once. Yeah, and by the way, a couple of the other teams that were rumored to be looking to trade up for Penix were, I think, the Saints and Raiders. So they're, if you believe the report,
I don't buy the D stuff is BS. Let's throw this on the line. Come on, like we're gonna eat $23 million of dead money to move up to Atlanta to then go take Michael Penix, and beyond that, Atlanta turned down getting DK Metcalf, still getting probably another first round pick at 16. No, I don't buy either end of that.
Yeah, that's the part that I question. But the trade room, the attempt on the part of these teams to trade up for Penix, maybe I could see that.
Yeah, certainly, no, that part definitely I could see Seattle of kicking those tires and that, but not that just would never have made sense. Not unless you're getting into like top 3 territory, would you have been dangling that asset, in my opinion.
Yeah. I would have bought the rumor much more if it was we're trying to trade up with New England to get Drake May. I'll put it that way.
Yeah, that I could kind of buy into, and that's a John Schneider quarterback. You could see how that would have worked, but not the other way around. So we'll see what the Giants do, though. Upo, if they get Noon, I'll laugh a little bit if that's their first pick coming up tomorrow, man. That's for sure. That'd be pretty funny. Concierge with Nolan, thank you for another 50 and a $5 coming in hot with the double don't know. Thank you for that, my man. He says, and this is a good time to talk about these presumptive scenarios for tomorrow, Brendan, as part of this show. He says, Dear Atlanta, can I offer you Daryl Taylor for the low price of a 3rd round pick? Boy, if only if, man. I would be throwing him that offer, and I'd even throw him a 5th on top of that if I could find a way to make that work. Brendan, I'm sure you've been asked a bunch on your chat on this. Concierge Nolan, we're gonna jump off the back of your little don't know for this. Thank you for that, and going down this line. How, Brendan, do the Seattle Seahawks get a 2nd round pick back tomorrow?
I think that's going to be really hard to do, but it seems like they've liberated themselves to move off of Draymond, so he could be part of a package. And I don't think Draymond on his own would be worth much more than like a 5th round pick. So you would have to roll it into some kind of a package. And maybe you throw in Daryl Taylor, and maybe that boosts the value up to like a 4th. And then you roll that in with your 3rd round pick, and then maybe you've got enough to move up into the 2nd. I don't really want to trade any picks next year because I think those picks next year are pretty nice. I think the draft class next year is going to be pretty juicy because a lot of people have been saying that all the NIL dam is finally going to burst, right? Because the NIL was holding back all these fringe prospects, and next year is supposedly the year they're finally all going to come out. So I'm not really looking to trade future capital, but you could maybe package together Draymond, Taylor. I'm not going to say Woolen anymore. I think the trading Woolen thing is a little off the table now that you didn't use your top pick on a defensive back. Or at least it's a lot less likely, unless you're trading up for a defensive back, I guess. Maybe you're trading up for Cooper DeJean. I don't know.
It is a really deep draft for corners too, where you can find some relative decent quality a little bit later on if you wanted to, because it's right there with receivers being the deepest in the draft.
Yeah, so it's doable. I don't know. I mean, do you think that Daryl Taylor has value in this league?
Not really. No, I think I think you're in the right spot of like, we're going to have to put this in. We're going to have to put this in. We're going to have to throw a 4th and 3rd in there. I think it's going to be very hard to get the 2nd round pick, Brendan. It's especially with the way, look at how these 1st round teams acted with their trades, man. Everybody was being kind of everybody's got their butt cheeks clenched out there. Nobody's letting it fly a little bit, and you need a little more movement to expect that to happen. I feel like teams in the second round are just going to kind of stand pat because they know this is where the value of the draft is. Why move out of the value to get extra fourth or fifth round guys that aren't particularly really good in our valuation of them? That's the part that I wonder with trying to manufacture this. I think John's going to try, Brendan, but is that going to be enough? Do you think? Do you think that gets it done? It might, but I think both those two players are kind of their values at a low part. This is why I wanted to move Daryl Taylor last year when his value was at his highest. He had 2 years of club control. That's the time to move there.
Yeah, and generally speaking, I feel like teams in these situations always err on the side of let's keep what we have and see what happens.
Yeah,
because it's hard to make a trade happen. You have to find another team that wants the player. You have to find another team that wants the player that has a asset that you want. So you have to put all those things together to find a trade partner. It's easier to just say, well, he's here, I'm here. Let's just see what happens.
The devil, right? The devil, just go with what it is. And yeah, I think that's what they did do there. But if we can find a way to move him, I'd love to see it, Nolan. Saves you some money on both of those two fronts. If you moved both Draymond and Taylor, I think you save about $8 million, $9 million off the cap right off the shoot. So there's also a little bit of a financial imperative here too that could factor in.
Right. And other teams that you trade with know that, which is why they wouldn't give you that much, because they know that you're chasing those savings as much as any kind of a compensatory pick.
Agreed. Yeah, agreed. But certainly Atlanta not taking an edge rusher in the first round, passing on Dallas Turner now. Maybe they're a little more in the market for a guy that's not necessarily a rookie, but ready to go out there, especially then that they are in a Super Bowl mindset, Brendan. Super Bowl drive, as they would say.
Now, I would not recommend Daryl Taylor to a team trying to go win a Super Bowl. If we're being honest.
No, I'll give it to. I'll take the trade though. I'll take all their trade assets. I'll tell them after the trade and be like, oh, by the way, that's not going to work. Thank you. No, we're going to put this over here, but thank you though. It's very kind of you. So we can hope, Nolan. I'll do a handstand if we can get a third round pick back for Taylor. I'll make Brendan do a handstand too if that happens. Nolan with another $2 donation. Thank you, Nolan, for all your support. It says, wouldn't they just take Romo at 8 and cut DK's cost?
Logically speaking, yes, but maybe they loved Penix. Maybe John actually does look at Penix and see Drew Brees, like you were saying. Maybe he sees Dan Marino. Maybe he sees this superstar quarterback that is like, I'll eat the DK dead money to get this guy because I believe in him that much.
Yeah, it's just hard for me, Nolan, with seeing the DK trade of this because it's that dead money Brendan just talked about. It's the $23 million dead money. And then, okay, are you moving DK and your first round picks? You're giving up both of that to get to 8. You'd have to do that for a quarterback at that point. Even with Romo, you're not getting the cheap Romo deal then because then Romo's he's the 8th overall pick. He's making $9-10 million a year. You have the dead money of DK coming through. By year 2 of Romo, the costs go up even more at that point. So it's not really a lot of savings in here on the DK deal. It's part of the big part of I just didn't think a trade was really a possible thing here because there's no real pathway to you getting back the returns for doing it.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree with that. And I want to be very clear. Me talking about all this is just because that's what I saw reported. I don't want to trade DK.
No, I know.
I cannot make a DK trade work because the amount that I need to get back to compensate me for that dead cap hit is something that I don't think any team is going to give up, especially in this receiver class. Like, why would you trade multiple first-round picks for DK Metcalf when you can just draft Romo Dunzier, or you can draft Brian Thomas Jr., or even a guy like Adonai Mitchell, who I know has problems, has all the potential in the world, in my opinion.
Oh, absolutely, he does. Yeah, I mean, it's the receiver core is the deepest in this draft. This is not the year. To your point, this is not the year to move a great receiver and try to get maximum assets back. Not in this draft. Not with these receivers.
I agree.
It's a little bit tougher. Nolan with another $5, man. Thank you for all your donations tonight, Nolan. He says, I've heard from so many that John wants a quarterback. I would think he wants the quarterback. Is Rattler the guy or a guy? Appreciate you both. Well, thank you, Nolan. Thank you for all of your support, brother. Very, very kind of you tonight. You mentioned Rattler before. You know my opinion where I stand a little bit on him, but is he the Russell Wilson 3rd round guy?
I think 3rd round value on Rattler is fine. But I don't think he's the guy. No, there are some aspects to Rattler's game that I think are impressive. I think to a certain extent he is being pushed down the draft board because of his prior reputation that saw him get kicked around college football to the extent that he was. But I don't think you can look at a guy with that lack of relative mobility and say that he's the guy. There are some things that he will never be able to do because of his somewhat limited physical profile. So to me, if you draft him, you're drafting him as a guy who you hope can maybe become a decent starter at some point. Like you once comped him to Dak Prescott without the mobility.
Mm-hmm.
And Dak Prescott without the mobility is a quarterback who I don't know if I really want any part of that, right? That's like Dak's mobility was a big part of what made him viable for the early part of his career. So it's like, okay, what am I left with? Now, I think Rattler has a better arm than Dak because Dak's arm isn't all that great. But fundamentally, I can agree with the comp in the sense that I don't think there's quite enough there.
Yeah. And I think to Brendan's point, I'm in the same place on this, Nolan. To me, he is a quarterback. He is a guy, not the guy. If he could have gotten just a little bit more from the mobility side, but running a 5.5 40, and you see it on the tape where he can't get away from anybody. He can't even do subtle pocket mobility. It's like he's got to trust the quick release and getting the ball out of his hand and take the hit. And there's a lot of times he's standing tall, taking that hit, throwing that ball, but you got to be able to move a little bit. This isn't even improvisation stuff that Brendan was talking about with Penix. I would just say that this is just standard issue. Can you move a couple spaces to your left or right, step back quick, and be, somewhat sudden in your movement to get away from pressure suddenly? And it's just, he doesn't have that as much in his bag, in my opinion, which does lower down on top of being a smaller guy, 6 feet tall. It's not 6'1", 6'2", 6 feet tall is how big this guy is. I think John was, by showing you that he was interested in trading for Penix, maybe it was Grubbs pushing him. Maybe it was he just loved Michael Penix that much. He certainly seemed to be driven and willing enough to move up in this draft to get that guy as the guy. So that does indicate that John will be willing to target a guy, the one. But I think that he's also been flummoxed over recent years by the fact that he wants to come from that Packer organization that for a yearly basis, for a lot of times they would take a quarterback. And this is where I got in the debate about Penix 2 days ago, Brendan, where people were like, they'll have 3 quarterbacks then. Why would they carry the 3 quarterbacks? And I said, John comes from the Packer organization that had 3 quarterbacks on their active roster through his time there. We had 3 active quarterbacks on our roster there with Tavares Jackson, Matt Flynn, and Russell Wilson in 2012. He is absolutely willing to carry 3 QBs on the roster. It's not something he sees their benefit. It's like a stock exchange thing for him. He's investing into his quarterbacks, and Packers used to get some returns on that type of stuff. I don't see Rattler as that guy. I'd rather at this point have Jordan Travis. At least he gives you the mobility, maybe not the same arm talent, and you get him later. I think that's a better way to go, especially with that late third round pick's got to be a little bit to something that's got to be like inside linebacker or interior offensive line. Those are going to be way more valuable, way higher valuation points to me in the draft at that point than going quarterback.
Yeah, I think Travis would be the guy to look at if you're thinking about this third quarterback thing.
Yeah. I would lean that direction too.
Somebody like a Joe Milton, who I understand is kind of a meme at this point because he's so bad at actually playing quarterback. I would probably prefer that.
Oh, you're getting him in the 5th, 6th, 7th round, maybe. First taking Rattler in that 3rd. That's a big difference. And to your point, I don't think you're getting a monstrous big difference in the player you're actually getting as the bottom line. But thank you, Nolan. I appreciate for all your donations, and great question in addition to that. Because that's going to be a guy that's going to be on a lot of people's radar tomorrow as a possibility for your Hawks, especially understanding that Penix was being kind of circled around a little bit. And I go, oh, wait, they are getting in that hot to trot spot to try to get another QB in the house. Bear with me on my voice here, Brendan. Sorry, man. It's leaving me.
Not a problem.
ALG Investments, thank you for the $5 donation. It says, John trading up in the 1st will happen when Russ wins another Super Bowl or stops being corny.
I do wonder if the right quarterback would get him to change his mind at some point, because we're traditionally never been bad enough to get that quarterback on our own merits is not the right word there, like lack of merits, on our own inability to play football. So I do wonder if the right quarterback would have him reconsider. But I mean, the odds of us ever finding that out are pretty low.
Well, if we get confirmation from John that he did try to trade up in this 1st round, Brendan, I mean, that would be as much as anything we've gotten in 14 years, right? That's the closest we would have. I've never heard of them being in on any other trade ups. Have you? And so this, to me, that would be as much evidence as we've ever had that they were willing to do it. The fact that they even were playing footsies with the Falcons and willing to move up there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, you'd think anybody would be willing to do it in some circumstance. I would hope that no GM out there would just be like, nope, never trading up, hanging up the phone immediately when somebody asks me to trade up in the first round. You would hope that you'd at least be willing to listen, even if you're really resistant to it.
Yeah, I would hope. I would. And I think you mentioned next year's draft capital. I agree with you. However, if we are going to try to move up in the second round this draft, I don't want it to be at the behest of next year's draft capital, because I really want to use that draft capital for the players you talked about, the NIL money that's coming into play. The other thing that's coming into play, Brendan, is the last year of the COVID players, last year of the 6th year players, last year of the artificially inflated drafts with extra players in it. So I want to keep it, but also if John has a quarterback in that draft that he wants to select as that guy, maybe we're not running into a draft next year where 6 guys are going to be taken by so much of a vibrant need of those teams at the top to go grab those guys. Maybe that there's a little bit of a chance of some of these guys having a chance to move and slide a little bit further down the board, rather than 1, 2, 3, 4, like that, and if that happens, maybe John will be more willing to move up for a guy like that. He's supposedly been hot to trot on, like a Quinn Ewers. I know everybody wants to get on this. The quarterback market's going to be weak next year. And I'm not as much buying into that. I don't know if you are either. I think it's a year-to-year thing. We got to we've been doing this for so long where it's like, these guys are going to be the good guys. It's going to be an awesome quarterback draft. And then it sucks. Or we get one where it's going to be like, oh, it's going to be an okay draft after Caleb Williams or John. And then it's actually pretty good. I think it can change over the course of the year. But I think John could be eyeballing next year. If he's showing any sort of already he's kind of chomping at the bit a little Michael Penix, but just won't give up the draft capital it takes, or Atlanta didn't want to move. Hey, he's starting to kind of turn that fire on. It's not a full flame yet, but at least he's lighting it up a little bit, which should encourage a lot of Seahawks fans that have been in that, can we just trade up once? Is it really is it sacrilege? It's against your religion, John. Come on.
Right.
Thank you though, ALG. Sorry, what were you going to say?
Nothing.
Appreciate you for that, man. Very kind of you on the don't know. Nick has been a member of the Hawks Nest for 2 long months. I think this is mine here. He says, why take Rattler when we have Sam Howell? Damn good question.
Yeah, I do think Rattler has a higher ceiling than Howell personally, but probably not by enough to justify using a pick. And I also think Rattler is a guy who is somewhat unlikely to reach his ceiling. There are some extenuating circumstances there that I think will have him closer to his floor than his ceiling. And he has a low floor.
Yes, he definitely does. I do like Howell a little bit better because Howell actually gives you mobility that Rattler doesn't have. He runs stronger with the ball in his hands. He can get away from guys a little bit better. I think he's got a bigger arm than Rattler, to be honest with you. Rattler's got maybe a quicker delivery, a little snappier on that side of it, but I think Howell's got a bigger arm overall. I would lean to Howell a little bit more over Rattler myself.
Yeah, I mean, realistically, any quarterback that we get for the rest of this draft won't be better than Howell, at least immediately, because you've got Rattler and then you've got Pratt, and Pratt's all right, but I don't know if I would view him as a better prospect than Sam Howell.
Says something though, doesn't it? Where Rattler might be older than Sam Howell, and yet we're saying, well, they're not going to reach that spot where Sam Howell is at 23 years old with them at 24. Yeah. It's kind of in itself is a kind of a good mark to Howell on that side of it, isn't it?
Yeah. So if you're drafting a quarterback tomorrow, or well, actually, it's past midnight, so today or tomorrow, you're not doing it because he'll be better than Howell year one. You're doing it because you're trying to develop him over the next couple years and then either trade him or use him down the line.
Yeah, I agree with that. And maybe it's 2 separate assets that aren't really relying on one another, Nick, where it's not really about signing up for Howell or signing up for Rattler. It's about, like I was talking about, that quarterback stock exchange where you're trying to take that old Packer way of, we build some value up in these guys and eventually we can trade them for a real nice pick. You get a Rattler in the 3rd, you eventually trade him for a high 1st or a late 1st or early 2nd, and maybe a route that John Schneider's looking to go, because that's the way the Packers used to do it. They did it with Mark Brunell. They did it with Aaron Brooks. Ty Detmer was in there. I mean, they would every year seemingly flip off a trade.
Matt Hasselbeck
with Seahawks did that. We had to give up a 2nd rounder for him. I think they drafted him the 6th round. So there is a tendency by John to look at that. I think that's why he talks so often about wanting to get a quarterback, is he wants to tap back into that free draft capital that you can get by building those guys up and working on them and making them better and better, and then moving them for something down the line. But thank you, Nick. Very kind of you for that support here on the channel. Gary Simonson coming in with 2 $20 donations back to back. Gary coming in strong. Thank you, Mr. Simonson. He says, why get Byron Murphy when you just paid Leonard Williams so much? Don't they play the same position, basically, the 3-tech?
I mean, they kind of do, but they're both going to be on the field at the same time, right? Because it's a 3-4. You've got a nose tackle, and then you've got two, they call it 4 eyes, but it's basically a 3-tech on either side of the nose tackle, right?
Yeah, pretty much.
So they're both on the field at the same time. Now, when you incorporate Draymond Jones into this discussion, I think that there is a little bit of like a, how are we going to make this work? But if we get rid of Draymond Jones, then it lines up. And by the way, I would not be shocked if the team just decides, you know what, let's just have a really deep defensive line for this year.
Yeah.
I think it's at least on the table.
Yeah. Gary, I think the thing that comes into play on this from my standpoint is that Brendan's long referenced this. What is it, Brendan? 2000, the Super Bowl teams that went to back-to-back Super Bowls. Gary, nobody went over 40 snaps a game on the defensive line, if I'm not mistaken, Brendan.
It might have been like 35.
30,
like really, really tight.
It was really, really tight. So, you go back again to the Super Bowl years and how we ran it. And what was the most successful? Was it having 4 frontline guys that were dominating, or was it having depth? And it was depth. You had Red Bryan out there as a 5-tech on early downs. You had Brandon Mabane out there with Randall McDaniel on the interior side, Chris Clemens on the outside. You'd flip them out, and you'd have Bruce Irvin brought in, and Cliff Averill brought in, and Michael Bennett kicked into the 3-tech, and Clint McDonald in at the other 3-tech, and there's your NASCAR package. It's rotations, it's packages, it's being able to not just have to rely on those front guys too often. You had to almost run last year, Leonard Williams, Gary, 900 snaps last season. That is almost the highest of his entire career as a 10-year career. That's way too many snaps. You can't rely on your guys to run that much. And if you look at Jaron Reed, it was much of the same way. He was being asked to just run too many of those. It's got to be a bit more about the load management, because when you take those guys to those high snaps, they're not as productive as players. They become less efficient in their ability to produce from their position because they're tired. It's the nature of the beast. You just can't play that many snaps and expect to be as potent as you would be if you were fresh. And so this is a move about keeping things fresh on that line. There is the 3-4 points Brendan talked about. When the team goes to 3-4, then yeah, you will get theoretically both guys on the field at once, depending on what happens with the Draymond Jones situation. But there's also a bit of this too, where yeah, there's going to be times Byron Murphy sitting on the bench and you have Williams out there, and he's going to be a rookie learning his way and coming along, and you're going to call upon him when you need it. And he's insurance there if Leonard Williams gets injured. But that's also part of picking for value, is that in picking for value, you're not picking for need. You're not saying this is the position we need to go get, and that's the position you go get. One of the downsides to picking for value is you end up in the pickle of sometimes stacking a depth chart. That's one of the direct correlating quasi-negatives that you have to run into, is that might happen. If you're going to stay true to your draft philosophy and draft for value and not for need. And as I've always said, you got to pick a lane on this. You can't do that. I want to, put both of my legs on either side of the fence. You have to pick a lane. And so in picking that lane, this is what this is going to lead to. It's going to lead to like last year when we took Derek Hall, but we had Uchenna Nwosu and we had Daryl Taylor and we had Boye Mafe. What are we doing? You're picking for value. And that's the most highest value guy you got on the board is the one you're grabbing. It's going to lead to these conundrums. But the key here, Gary, is, in my opinion, and see if Brendan's buying this, you eventually build the strongest overall team, both in the short term and in the long term, by taking this approach, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the way the Seahawks drafted for years, from like 2013 to 2021, where they clearly weren't taking that approach, and it was almost always disastrous. It was almost always awful.
Yeah.
So I think it's very clear this is the right way to do things. And sometimes you are going to end up with a little bit of a log jam, but it's rarely a bad problem to have a log jam. It's usually a positive thing. There are plenty of ways to get around it. There are plenty of ways to deal with it. And at the end of the day, it'll end up working out. So especially when it comes to a position like the defensive line, I think if there's a position that you want to dump a little too much money into, it might be a position like that. And then there are positions you dump a little less money into, like off-ball linebacker, maybe safety, maybe, I don't know, maybe right guard.
Tight end.
Mm-hmm. Well, actually, last year, all the best teams had an elite tight end.
Oh, there you go.
Laporta, running back. Kittle. Yeah, running back. I mean, everybody's figured that one out, though.
Yeah.
That's like, that's like when all the teams start using Moneyball. Everybody already figured out the running back thing.
Yeah, they pretty much locked in on that one with it. So yeah, I think it's a good thing, even though it does lead you into this bit of this pickle at times, Gary. It still is a thing. Brendan makes good points on this. It still has a lot of intelligence behind it, and it makes more sense the longer you get down the line. So you start to see other moves made. Then, oh, now we can get out from under the Draymond deal. Oh, now we save the money on that. And okay, now we can put that money into, it starts to be these other things that then factor out. It's the Eagles last year. They go get Nolan Smith, but they've got Hassan Reddick, they've got Sweat, they've got Brandon Graham. You go, well, what are you doing? But that's one of the reasons the Eagles have been able to, rebuild their Super Bowl team from Super Bowl, and then you went through a rebuild cycle and you're right back to a Super Bowl, because they draft for value every year in their spots and where they pick. They took Quinyon Mitchell, another player this year, did the Eagles in the first round, where it's you in their pick. Me and Brendan both love Quinyon. We both look at him as the sub blue chip prospect in this draft. Is again evidence with the Eagles of, yeah, that's kind of a need for them, but it's also them picking to value, and that's where they stick. And the Nolan Smith allowed them to then move Hassan Reddick before he started to cost too much for their own care. There started to be rumors with Hassan that, oh, well, maybe he's not wanting to play the run as much. Maybe he's just kind of interested in being a pass rusher and stacking up sacks. Well, now they can go to the Nolan Smith, who is the best run defending edge out of last year's draft, and hope he can kind of grow into that Hassan Reddick role. So it provides you flexibility in the future to not get held hostage by certain players where you go, oh, we got to hold on to Draymond Jones, because what else are we going to go out there and grab? What else is available out there is going to be better right now? Mm-hmm. And this takes you out of that type of situation. Gary, thank you. It looked like it double dipped you on the dono, so I'm sorry I did that to you, man. But thank you for the $2 $20 donos. It's the same message in there. Sorry
thank you, Gary.
To do that, but appreciate it, Gary. Very, very, very kind of you, man. Concierge Nolan coming in with another one. Thank you, Nolan, man. 4 or 5 donations on this one, man. You're awesome. Says all of this commentary is what says Rattler isn't tilting the room. I think you want to buy low and build a guy for trade bait like Jimmy G at New England, or get lucky with a Russ. Upside, I think he's talking here, right? A little bit on this.
Yeah. And I want to say one thing. There are several evaluators who I respect who love Rattler. Like, I've seen a lot of people calling him a first-round talent. They think he's a first-round quarterback. I know it's out there that people feel that way about him. People say that he has one of the best arms of any quarterback in the NFL. People say that he has Patrick Mahomes-like ability. I just don't see it. But I know that perception is out there. I know that some people would say that he does tilt the room. But I just, especially in the third round, which is what I think you'd have to spend to get him. I think he's a third round guy one way or the other. It'd be one thing if you were getting him in like the 6th round and it's just kind of like, whatever. But that's not the case.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, you're talking even in the 5th round, and I'm like, okay, you can kind of start to bring me aboard here. But the guys that I think we're looking at on our board in the late 3rd round, you're kind of referencing this. The late 3rd round guys you have available at other positions end up just kind of weighing you down more to them, rather than going with Rattler. Tilt the room or not. Is that a fair way of putting it?
Yeah, and I know there's this urgency from a lot of fans to get the quarterback, find the next great quarterback, find the next franchise quarterback, because it's so important to have the quarterback. But the kind of inverse of that statement to me is what I'd come back to. It has to be the right quarterback. Not having the quarterback sucks, but drafting a guy that you think is the quarterback and then he's not the quarterback is disastrous, because it takes years off of your plan. It sets you back. Like, look at how far back Denver has been set back because they thought Russell Wilson would be the guy and he wasn't. Look at how far back a team like the Browns gets set back because they thought Johnny Manziel was the guy and he wasn't. So I want to get it right. And I don't think you're getting it right with Rattler. Not really. He could be okay.
Or even Deshaun Watson with Cleveland. They didn't learn their lesson on the man. So they went back and did it again here, and putting your hopes in the wrong guy, and I agree. I think you got to be very much a surgeon on the kind of guy you're looking to get, and not just get a guy, especially with the miss rate, Brendan. What is it? 30% of the quarterbacks taken in the first round are hits. That means 2 out of 3 miss. And so you got to be right. You got to be true with it and not try to stretch to make it happen, but truly be a believer in the guy. And if so, then I'm fully in support if John wants to do that. But I don't want him to just get a guy. Just get somebody. Just pick a dude. No, you're gonna have a vision with it and how you do it. So agreed, Nolan. It's got to be specific. It's got to be the right kind of guy, not just to pick a guy for that de facto role. And that's a little bit of what, in my opinion, Brendan's right. There's a lot of people that love Rattler and a lot of people that know football really well that are really high on Rattler. I don't happen to be so on him in that realm. but it doesn't mean that John maybe isn't when we get to that late third round. Maybe he's looking at like, hey, we're able to get a first round quarterback here in the late third round, and that's what they tell us. Again, if they make that pick, Brendan, I'm not going to think he's lying to us. I don't think he's going to be doing that because he didn't believe that. But I also think it's very unlikely to happen. Mm-hmm. Thank you, Nolan, man, for the $10 donation, the $50 drop, and everything in between today, man. You are very, very kind on that front of things. I really appreciate it. And a great perspective on that as well. Mm-hmm. Love where you're thinking. Power Hitter has been a member of the, I think it's yours on this one, maybe mine. I forget on this.
I think it's mine.
He's been a member for 11 months, almost celebrating a year with you there, Brendan. Says, what's your best case scenario for tomorrow? Ooh, that's a great question.
I'm assuming this is something that can realistically happen.
Okay.
Like Cooper DeJean is not falling to 81. We know that.
Not happening.
I wonder if somebody do you think Cooper Beebe could fall to 81?
It's possible because there seems to be such a wide divergence of opinion on him in pro circles a little bit.
What about Junior Colson?
No.
Then Beebe might be the best case scenario that I can come up with.
What about trading up into the second round as a part of the best case scenario?
Once you do that, I still might end up going after a guy like Beebe because he is the best left guard available. And to me, there are only 2 left guards remaining in this draft that I think would be good day one starters, Beebe and Pooney. So I kind of feel obligated to try to come away with one of those 2.
Understandable. Understandable. I like Haynes and still like a couple of guys on this. Those guys are better, I will say, but I think you can find some functionality. I think for my best case scenario, Power Hitter would be to package like Brendan had kind of put together as far as the package of getting into the second round, 4th round pick, put Daryl Taylor in there, put Draymond in there. Maybe you got to go into from the future and take a future 4th as a final kicker pick in there to get yourself into the second. Go get yourself Junior Colson in that second round. Come back and take T'Vondre Sweat in the late 3rd and cement this front 7. I know it's not them attacking the offensive line. I get that. But if we come away with that as our interior, our run defense is fixed, in my opinion. We're not going to have a problem with there. I'd also be okay with seeing if T'Vondre can dip and maybe take a guard. Maybe it's a Pooney. Maybe it's a Christian Haynes. Maybe it's a Mahogany there in the late 3rd. I'm okay with going that route too with Colson on the front end as well. So that would be kind of my dream scenario is get back in the second, get Colson and come back and maybe either get your lineman or be able to just take advantage of T'Vondre Sweat's fall at that point.
Yeah, that's not too bad either. That's I could get behind that, but I don't think the second round thing is happening. I don't even know if that package would get it done, honestly, because I don't know if those players have value. I just don't.
I think you're 100% right, but it was the best case scenario. So I was trying to, I'm kind of dreaming big on it, but I agree. Your bottom line on that is probably the case where you're not going to be able to put the package together. We're seeing how hard it is to make these trades in the first round. I don't think it's going to get hugely more easier tomorrow. Especially because I think the teams are aware, Brendan, that after you get into like 105, 106, there's kind of a distinct drop in the level of the talent across the board at that point.
Yeah, it's not deep. I think maybe you can get through the 4th round and still have it be pretty good, but
yeah, there'll be a couple guys dipping in there, but it's starting to get lean at that point, and then it's hard to find much as you get into the depths of the draft. Thank you, Power Hitter. Appreciate you for that. Samuel Carlson, thank you for the $2 donation. He says, I am happy for Penix. Went from not invited to picked in the top 10. Yeah, he wasn't invited to the deal, huh?
No, he was they showed him watching from home. They showed him watching from home. Like they did. Remember that the COVID year where everybody was at home? It was like that for him. Yeah.
Yeah, that sucks. Yeah, it would have been cool to see him out there in person and being able to celebrate this as the top 10 pick. He's worked really hard to get to where he's gotten, and he had to overcome quite a bit there. I mean, regardless of where you stand on him, want you to be your quarterback, not want to be. He's a guy that's easy to root for because he's had to go the hard way to get there. And you definitely got to give a tip of the cap to those kind of guys who've had to really grind and fight and overcome quite a bit to reach the mountaintop, as Penix has.
Absolutely.
Thank you, though, Samuel. And that does suck he wasn't invited. Garth Knight with the $5 donation. Thank you, Garth, for that. I appreciate you, man. All your donos today as well. He says Penix has monster hands. Indeed, I think he's over 10 inches, Brendan, 10 and a third or something.
Oh yeah, they're the biggest hands of any QB in this class for sure.
His control of the ball is legit. Let's keep talking dirty South Pac-12. Let's keep talking it, man. And yeah, when you have those big hands, it makes a difference. It's not going to come into play in that dome when he plays because he's not going to have to deal with the elements, but that's specifically where it really helps you, according to quarterbacks, is when you got a little bit longer arm, longer fingers, bigger hands. The wet elements happen, the inclement weather, the cold weather comes into play. You're able to still maintain your grip on the ball, which allows you to keep that control. And we've all had a Nerf ball. We've all taken one of those little Nerf balls and gone from a pro NFL ball to a Nerf ball. And it's like, that's kind of what it's like for Penix with the ball in his hands. And you have so much more control and ability to really, really get the ball out of your hand and you feel like you got more velocity too when you're throwing that thing, don't you, Brendan, when you got the little Nerf going. And that's what it's like with Penix. He's got you feel his hands on the football field and how he's moving that ball around.
Yeah, there's some things about Penix that are great. And I'm not down on him the way some people are. I know that there are people out there who thought he should be a 6th round pick. I know people out there who thought it was absolutely undraftable pretty much because of the injuries. I'm not one of those people. I think I would have taken him in the late 1st, early 2nd. I think that's about where he belongs because there are so many things he has to work through to become effective at the NFL level. And I'm just not convinced. I think that there's also some issue. He doesn't use the middle of the field well. That's another thing with him. And I think using the middle of the field is so important in the modern NFL. I think that one thing Michigan did in the national title game was dare him to throw the ball underneath over the middle, and he could not do it. Mm-hmm. And he's an older prospect. I don't know if this stuff is ever going to come. So I just have a little bit of pessimism there.
I get it. I think it's a valid assessment of the situation with it, and it's going to be on him to kind of prove those to be things that he can overcome. So definitely something where he's got to start to incorporate that a little more into his game, or it's going to limit his upside and where he can kind of fully be and where he can go. Mm-hmm. But thank you, Garth. I appreciate the donation on that. Josh, thank you for the $2 donation. He says Zinter and Bortolini in the early to mid 100s.
I mean, yeah. If Zinter can fall that far, and it's possible because of the injury, I'd definitely jump on it at that point. That's pretty exciting.
Yeah, if you come out of the 4th round with your 2 4th-round picks and you've gotten with Zinter and Bortolini, I'm going to feel good about what they've done with the interior of the offensive line. I mean, it's to get that at that point in the year, you're looking at probably 2 starters in the long term at that point on the guard. So I think Zinter, once he gets healthy, will beat Bradford out. He's not going to have the athletic ability of Bradford. He's a year behind Bradford, but he's so much more technically refined than Bradford. And I think Bortolini will eventually find, if he was to come into this offense in the spread system, I think he could fit as a left guard. I don't think he'd be a left guard in all this, but in a spread system here, I think he could make it work.
Yeah, I'm just really trying to figure out that left guard thing. I don't want Tomlinson starting for us this year. I feel like that's going to end really badly. I'm just trying to avoid that.
Still a signing that doesn't make a lot of sense to me. It's just going to handicap your offense and what you can run if you have him out there starting, Brendan. It really will. Thank you, Josh, for the $2 donation. I appreciate you on that. Boy, this voice is leaving me here. We're going to probably wrap this up pretty soon, folks, because my voice is about to tap out. Jason Tudor, thank you for the $2 donation. He says, Brandon, go to bed. Yeah, I know I'm trying to talk and I hear my voice is whispering out of it. Is it coming out? He says, we got 6 rounds left. I know it's going to, Brandon's good voice is going to be toast by the time Jason and I get to the other side of this. That's for sure. Hopefully Brendan will be too. I'm not the only one suffering over here. You're sounding pretty fresh. What are you doing? Honey over there? You got some tea going? Is that what's happening?
Yeah, I do a lot of things. I think it's also very important to not talk at all during the day. I just kind of, in order to prepare for these draft shows, I just kind of meditate on my bed all day, not using my throat at all.
It's true. I find myself doing the same thing of try to talk as little as you possibly can because you're going to need this sucker later. So it doesn't usually go well though. When I'm trying to think that people are asking me questions right and left. So it's like, thank you though, Jason. We'll be in it here soon on this one. Power Eater brings up something I want to talk to you about, Brendan. Power Eater, this is great timing because this was one of the last things I didn't want to talk to Brendan about on the stream because I think that the worst pick in the 1st round is a very easy one to target. I know you didn't like the Michael Penix one, man. I get it. Okay. And Power Eater, thank you for the $10 donation. He says, with players like Ricky Parasol and Xavier Legette finding their way to the 1st round, do you have any predictions on players that could free fall? Guys like Nakobe Dean last year or Sealy Ringo. Well, first off, and we're gonna get your question on this, but I want to talk to Brendan about this Parasol thing. My opinion that the Niners, and you saw my big board, Brendan, where I had Parasol.
Right.
I laughed my ass off when they took Ricky Parasol and the thought that they're going to maybe trade Deebo Samuel for a 2nd round pick tomorrow. just makes me so gleefully happy with this pick.
I don't get it either. You've got Lad McConkey on the board. You've got Adonai Mitchell on the board. You've got Xavier Legette on the board even. That would have been fine. I mean, I think it would have been a little bit of a reach, but not a critical one. Even Keon Coleman. Like, that one, I don't think it's worse than the Penix thing. I still think the Penix thing is worse. But I think this makes less sense because I can kind of see what they were thinking with the Penix thing. I just think it's stupid.
Yeah.
I have no idea what they were thinking here. No idea whatsoever. I think it's more embarrassing than the Penix pick. Like, everybody's laughing at them. I know there are some people out there that defend the Penix thing. There's
awesome.
Nobody defending Pierce Hall.
No, I don't see. Even the Niner fans are defending it. Like, I just took a quick screenshot of them looking where they were at. They were looking like they had seen some things, Brendan. You know, they had that 1,000-yard stare going. Like, okay, he's not going to be it, man. I trust my evaluation on Parasol. Like, I know he blocks. That's why they got him, Brendan. He blocks. Well, he blocks. Guy's got 30.5-inch arms. You know what I mean? Like, he's 6'1". He looks 5'10" on a football field. I think that the Niners are going to look at that pick, and especially if it's in tandem with trading Deebo Samuel, and that is not going to twist right for him. They're trying to re-sign Brandon Ayuk. That's the whole point of this a bit, but that is not a good flip. That's not a good exchange, especially at this draft, Brendan, with all the good wide receivers in this draft. End up with that as your combination. Like, ugh.
Yeah.
I don't get it. Free fall guys, Brendan, in this draft. Who will be our equivalent of our Nakobe Dean and Sealy Ringo this year?
Well, I have heard that a lot of GMs do not like JPJ the way that a lot of the fans did. A lot of them were not impressed. So he's, I think, a candidate to fall. Do you think maybe the whole white defensive back thing just hasn't caught on yet? Maybe Cooper DeJean might just keep slipping. Nobody wants to take the white corner.
I think that there's half the NFL teams that see him as a corner and half the NFL teams that see him as a safety. And safeties just don't go in the first round, really, right? And so with that discrepancy between the two outlooks and the player he's going to be, it makes it harder for the landing spot for him, I think.
I think those would be my two guys that I think could shockingly still be there by like the mid-second, late second.
I like it. No, I like it, Brennan. Obviously, I think Tavondre Sweat falls with his DUI stuff. I think there's a good chance with Tyler Nubin and his testing numbers that causes him to slip a little bit further than where he really should go with where his tape is at. I think we might have to wait a long time tomorrow for the running backs to get taken. I don't think that there's going to be any rush for Trey Benson or Jonathan Brooks necessarily. It's going to be probably late into the second round before those guys, tend to go.
Yeah.
I can't think of anybody else necessarily stands out. Kitchens is another guy with Nubin. Both those guys just didn't test well, even though their tape's so good, which may allow them to drop in a way that wasn't anticipated. Brandon mentioned Junior Colson. I don't think he will draft, but is it possible with him? I don't think he had the great testing. No, you didn't have any testing numbers, I don't think, with him necessarily. So he does get harder to calibrate. How about Peyton Wilson? With his injury history and the risk of the short arms with him. And, he's a guy with a lot of divisive opinion as well out there. So that would be another guy that I would look and say would probably have a good chance of probably, maybe even dipping into late third round as a possibility.
Yeah. I think that I wouldn't be surprised if there were no running backs gone until late second, though. That's kind of what I expected. Yeah. So I don't think Trey Benson deserves to go until the late second, and I don't think any other running back deserves to go until the third. So
it's just unusual, historically speaking, because even when there's guys that don't deserve to go, they still find a way to go into that top of that second round because the value ends up being too good for teams. But I just don't think that'll be that way this year. Just don't see it playing out that way.
Right.
Oh my goodness. All right. Thank you, Power Hitter, for the $10 donation. I appreciate you for that, man. And Nolan, I think you're going to finish this up with this dono because my voice is about to drop, brother. So I got nothing left in the tank today myself. We got 2 days left. Nolan, thank you again, man, for an awesome $50 donation, your second one tonight, and multiple over have you put today. Thank you for all that support very much. I wish I could speak the words right to show you my appreciation, but the air is leaving. I can hear me breathing. The air is just kind of popping. It's just air now. But thank you for the $50 donation, Nolan. I really do appreciate that. He says, silly idea. Empty the tank, 4th round and beyond, to move up as many as you can. Lean on the UDFA recruiting ability of our recent college staff. If this draft is weak, how much worse are the UDFAs? Would want to borrow from next year. Ooh, I like the boldness of it, Nolan, and being aggressive. I always like a bit of aggressiveness in my draft approach.
The issue is I feel like other teams are aware how shallow this draft is. So those picks that you have 4th round and beyond are not very valuable because teams realize what's going to be available there. I don't think this draft being shallow is like a secret that only we know or anything like that. It's pretty obvious.
Yeah, I do tend to agree with Brendan on this one, Nolan, where ideally I'd love to do that. Ideally, if I could find a taker to flip out 2 4th round picks in a 5th round to get me up into the 2nd or something, or early 3rd or something like that, that'd be great to pull that off. And I'd love to see it. But I think to Brendan's point, it's pretty well understood and established, I think, in this draft that it had some good meaty portions up at the top in the 1st round, 2nd, 3rd round, even into some of the 4th. But there is a distinct place where this draft does drop off in that talent wise, and it's widely known where it's going to just make it hard for you to get that value. I think it's also part of what Nolan impacted a little bit of why we didn't see more trades in the 1st round, or when we did see trades, there wasn't a lot of compensation for moving. You weren't seeing teams really being given back a huge haul in return. It was very, very light. So it seems to be that the rest of the NFL is kind of aware of where this is at as well, Nolan, and I'm with it if we can pull it off. If you can find a taker, if we can get these package of picks and Taylor or Draymond Jones and find a way to get to 2nd or early 3rd round, John should do it. I absolutely hope he would be aggressive in taking that mode, but it does take a dance partner. And that's the one where I have a hard time with this, Nolan, when I look at this draft and how this will play out to go, boy, will you have that dance partner for you kind of having to talk? You're not giving them prime assets. You're not giving them future picks. You did say you're willing to borrow for next year, Nolan, and that may be what you'd have to do. Whereas 2 4th rounders, a 5th, next year's 4th or something, to try to get up into the early 3rd, you're probably going to have to give something like that up plentiful wise to make it happen. But I understand why you want it.
Yeah. I just don't think it's going to be on the table. Seems like, overall, this 1st round, we did not see a ton of trades. I expected complete chaos, and there wasn't. And I think it's just because teams are like, it's hard to trade. It's easy? Just sticking and picking. Just take the pick where the pick is. Yeah. I think teams are just like, that's not even. We got to field all these phone calls. We got to pick up the phone. We got to map it out on the value chart. We got to come back with a counter offer and then the counter. No, let's just pick.
Especially because no one's blowing you away anymore with offers, right? Everyone's playing their board and they're tightening down to the value based and the Jimmy Johnson chart and 17 points to your 17 points. And you're not feeling like you're getting a real win by moving back. It's like, okay, it's a kind of a win-win for both. What's the point of that? Just like you say, I'll just stay and pick at that point.
Yeah, unless you're the Bears trading with the Panthers. And, that requires true blue chip value picks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, absolutely. That would at that point. So, yeah, if we can, Nolan, I'm with it, man. Thank you again so much for all your support, by the way. You're just incredible on those donations, man. Just awesome. It would definitely help too if you could bump out some of those picks for the UDFAs. We've seen that definitely can help in recruiting guys if they think that there's a pathway to making the roster. So I do love where your head's at as far as the theory on this. And if they can make it go, let's make it go. If we got to kick Draymond, we got to kick Daryl Taylor in there, we got to make some things work to make that happen, then good, let's go. But it's going to take that trade partner willing. And like Brendan said, I think some of these teams just kind of went, threw up their hands and said, to hell with it. We'll just pick where we'll pick. Just call it a day. Teams are getting smart with these draft capital aspects and how much they're worth and cheap club control and a rookie deal. And it's all coming into factor. Analytics coming in now to inform these guys even more. So it's harder to kind of steal from teams, isn't it? It's kind of harder to sort of take advantage of guys, I think.
Yeah. That's why you need a Bill O'Brien in the league sometimes.
That's right. That's why you need a Billy Boy to make it to get you the goods. But Nolan, man, thank you so very much, brother. You are very, very kind on all that support. Roxanne Roll, thank you for the $10 donation. Says, whom are the first-year GMs we could take advantage of? We got New England, but then they got Wolf. That's the thing, is I don't think that John Schneider would take advantage of his former mentor's son. Would you? My mentor, you taught me as my mentor. Now I'm going to take advantage of your son. That seems kind of dirty of John to do something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Who else do we got out there?
Well, he's not a rookie, but that Broncos GM seems like he's pretty bad at his job.
He's pretty tasty. Yeah, I definitely would be burning up the line with him and Sean Payton. I mean, like, hey, you guys need to, get another pills, one of these receivers. So, maybe you, and so try to maybe work that one.
And he's about to get fired, so he's desperate.
Oh, he's sitting there just like losing hair. He's running his hands through his hair. He's got hair in his hands. He's going, blood pressure's up on all the medication, shotgunning the pills without any water. He's taking so many pills. But yeah, John's going to be in that same point, by the way, going back quarterback with Bo Nix again at this. Like, I better be right, or Peyton will not be long for the world there at Denver either on that. Can't think the Walmarts are just going to sit there and be like, okay, Sean, and that's a tough division. It's not like there's a clear pathway going through there with Harbaugh there now, and Andy Reid. If I'm a Bronco fan, I'm in tough straits right now.
Yeah. Did you like Joe Alt over Neighbors, by the way?
I did, because he wants to run the ball. He wants his line to control things. That's the Harbaugh way. Receivers don't control the Harbaugh offense. The offensive line controls the Harbaugh offense. So I get it from that standpoint. And then the understanding that Rashawn Slater had played some right tackle in college to begin things makes me believe that he can make that transition a little bit more seamlessly than other players could. Yeah. And they got a good line now, man. Joe Alt, Slater on the other side, Zion Johnson at left guard, Corey Lindsley at center. It's not a bad line. I know what they're end up doing at right guard for sure, but it's a pretty good line set up there.
Lindsley retired, but
did he retire?
He might have. I could be wrong. He might have, but either way, you're right. It's the start of a good fundamental offensive line.
Yeah, something that's always been a part of Harbaugh teams wherever he kind of tries to go. I can't think of any other new general managers this year, Roxanne. We had the new coaches, but I feel like some of the GMs kind of stayed in place like John did. Weren't new coach, but the GM stayed in place at least. So I can't think of a lot of new ones out there that we can take advantage of.
Yeah, I mean, even the new ones, they're smart, right? They're educated. They do the work. So you still can't take advantage of them.
Yeah, you get a lot of those guys that got the mathematics background and the analytics background. They're like, I know what you're trying to do with me on this trade chart. I've got the value chart ahead of me. I know what you're trying to do. It can't be like the draft day where you get that young, wasn't he trying to take advantage of the young Seattle GM or something?
I haven't seen movie.
Oh no, it's with the Panthers. The Panthers have a new GM, and Coster calls, and he totally makes the kid flip his head around on stuff. But I don't think we're going to be able to pull that kind of move off here this year, Roxanne. I think it's more new coaches, not as many new GMs across the hemisphere on this one. Thank you, though, for the $10 donation. And you guys, all of the donations today. We had well over 20 today on simply an hour and a half show. So thank you for all of the
yes,
support.
Thank you, everybody.
Much, much, much appreciated. Well, we've got the draft turning over tomorrow, day 2. Rounds 2 and 3, Brendan. We're only picking late third round, but we're going to see what our Hawks are going to do. Any predictions today, or any predictions for tomorrow as it stands by what you're standing, what you're feeling here, or do you?
It's so hard when you don't pick until 81. Like, it's so far away. It's just so hard to offer up a meaningful prediction because there's just so much space between us and then.
Yeah.
I want to say, I guess if I just had to throw something up at the board, I'd say Dominic Pooney, but it's not anything that I feel really great about. It's just some random thing I feel kind of okay about that I'm going to throw the dart at.
I like it, man. Hey, it's a good guess. It may be a possibility here, and I'll throw my hat into the. We'll see Seattle double dipping into the Texas defensive line. So let's go with Devondre Sweat in late third. Let's just do it. Let's just have some fun with it. Who knows what's going to happen? You know what I mean? Let's play around. That, or we go with an interior line, like Brendan said. I think that's kind of one of the ones. I think by that point, interior linebacker, you'll have Wilson, Cooper, Colson will be off the board. Maybe Trotter. Trotter might be a guy there in the late third. If he lasts too, is another possibility in that spot. I think
Cedric Gray, maybe.
Cedric Gray is another one that could be the guy that fits in there. That's about the same spot there for him too. So I think along these lines is where we're looking at here for the Hawks tomorrow. Interesting first day of the draft, Brendan. 14 straight offensive players to start the draft. And it put your Hawks in a very strange situation, but one that I think we're going to look back in time. I know there's some reticence on your part, and understandably so, but we'll look back in time and I think understand why they went this direction because of how wild that was as a start. We've never seen that in NFL history. 14 straight picks, offensive players. Kind of wild to watch.
Yep.
Well, folks, do me this favor if you could. Please hit the like button on either way, whether you're watching on Brendan's side or on the Hawks Nest side. Also, do me this favor. We're both marching our way forward here, trying to get our subs up. So please do subscribe to the channel on either side, be it on Seahawks Brendan Nelson over here at the Hawks Nest. We will be doing these post-game. We'll be doing these post-draft wrap-ups here over the next 2 days. So we'll be back tomorrow right after the draft. And of course, then on Saturday too, where I will be my voice will be a complete shell of itself. But
yeah, we may have to put that last show off until the following day.
We may have to, because I can already tell my voice is gonna be hanging on for dear life by day 3 here. So here we go. Thank you guys again for all of your support and dedications to both of our channels. We really do appreciate it on that side of it. Brendan, thank you for waiting for me late into the night here and being willing to chop it up with me, man. I really do appreciate it. I wanted to hear where you are, we're coming from on a couple of these topics. So it's interesting stuff. And let's see if our Hawks can continue to kill this draft tomorrow, kick its butt.
Yeah, let's see what's up. I'm excited. I'm ready to see what happens next.
We will both be back in less than 24 hours from our respective channels. We're live streaming the draft. Brendan's live streaming from his. I'm live streaming from mine. You can stream us both at the same time. We're also going to be doing the post-game discussion right after the draft as well. So a lot more B&B on the way to you. A lot more Brendan. We appreciate your watch. No matter what happened in this draft, no matter where you stand on the Byron Murphy selection, love it or hate it, keep the faith, my fellow Seahawks fans. I think they're going to still pull this off as far as this draft, and it's going to be a successful one. We look back at it, at all the picks and how John played his hand on this. We'll just have to see how it plays out as we go forward. But please do not you ever forget. Go Hawks.
Go Hawks.